Welcome back to the Amy NFL show. Super Bowl picks are next week. This week, we're doing the honors, but first, a recap of the championship round.
Last week we had Dom as our special guest, and all of us picked the same for both games. All three of us were wrong on the Chiefs versus Bengals. The Chiefs squeezed that one out 23-20. And in the Eagles-49ers game, it wasn't even close. We all picked the Eagles. They blew out the 49ers 31-7. I think we were wrong with our Bengals pick. It was the Chiefs the whole game. It wasn't a close game like the score said. The Chiefs dominated. We'll do better for the Super Bowl. Welcome back. We have some special guests with us this week. 1/3 of the Worsta family is here. We have Ira and David. Yay. Ira, what makes you a 49ers fan?
You know, the 49ers, they've been good for a lot of years. And then when my dad started cheering for the 49ers, I just started to be a 49ers fan too.
How about you, David?
Well, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where the 49ers were dominant, but I truly love Jerry Rice and his work ethic. He'd go out and win a Super Bowl, and the next day he'd be training for the next season. So if there's anybody that would be someone you'd look up to, it's Jerry Rice, and that's why I just fell in love with the Niners. He's one of the faces of the 49ers.
One of the best receivers in the game, and maybe one of the hardest workers ever.
Yes.
Let's see who everyone picked for their NFL honor winners. This year's MVP is really down to two candidates. Jefferson is a finalist. He's a wide receiver. They never win MVP these days. Hurts just has too talented of a team around him. He looked good in the first part of the year, but he missed a couple games. I don't think he'll be MVP. Allen, too many red zone errors, too many interceptions. He won't be the MVP. It's really down to Burrow and Mahomes. Burrow had a good season, especially the second half. Nice win streak to end the regular season, but it's really Mahomes. He led the best offense of the league, 41 touchdowns, over 5,000 passing yards. He really is the MVP for the NFL for 2022. How about you, David?
You know, in my mind, it boils down to two candidates. I know you named some talented players, but I think the biggest contributing factor is when you see an impact to your team. So in my mind, there's two, Joe Burrows and Jalen Hurts. Joe Burrows led his team after a very rough start to a streak of wins to end off the season. Jalen Hurts, you saw the impact when he was out for 2 games. His team lost both games. You know, my gut says Joe Burrows, but if I think logically, I think it will be Jalen Hurts as MVP for 2022 season.
Yeah, good point. Aiden, how about you?
I'm also in between two people. I got Mahomes and Hurts. I actually think it's going to be Hurts as well because of later in the season, Week 16 and 17, Hurts wasn't playing, and they lost both games. So, Hurts could be a key piece to winning the Super Bowl this year, and I think he's going to be the MVP this year as well.
Ira?
I'm between two, Jefferson and Hurts. The Eagles lost 2 games without Hurts. I'm probably picking Hurts too.
So we got 3 Hurts and 1 Mahomes.
If I were to truly pick the MVP, it would be Eagles' offensive line. Like, if you could pick a multiple group, because that group is strong.
Yeah, the whole group together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the key to winning the way the Eagles have won, right? That offensive line, that's the key. In my mind, this is a no-brainer. I know he led the league in sacks, but Nick Bosa is a runaway, I believe. I don't think it's just stats, but the impact that he made for his team on defense was massive. So if you look at tackles for losses, pressures, QB hits, he led in almost all those categories. So it wasn't just him getting sacks. It was the fact that he made the biggest impact on defense.
It's really quite simple. Nick Bosa is him. I think that he is easily going to be the Defensive Player of the Year. Just like Hurts, he makes a big impact, and especially when he's injured, they don't do as well without him. Bosa is a great player, good brother too, and I think Nick Bosa is going to win Defensive Player of the Year.
I'm choosing Bosa too. There's not much to decide. He's doing really great this season. A few fumble recoveries, fumbles, and sacks, and lots of other things that help the Niners win games.
I am making a clean sweep. I'm going Bosa too. I think Micah Parsons might be a defensive finalist every year he plays, but Bosa had more sacks, almost as many tackles. I think Chris Jones was probably the surprise pick, but Bosa's ahead of the other two guys quite handily, so all 4 of us on Bosa.
It's going to be Justin Jefferson. From the gritty grab against the Bills to the amazing route running. He has 13 out of 17 games with over 5 catches and 11 out of 17 games with over 60 receiving yards. That's really good. He led the league in receiving yards. He's going to be the Offensive Player of the Year, no doubt.
I'm choosing Jefferson too, not just because of the great catch against the Bills, but he's a really big impact to his team also. And there's also a few other good players on the Vikings too, but I'm choosing Jefferson.
The way I looked at it, it's probably not going to be a QB, so Mahomes and Hurts are probably out. This usually goes to a wide receiver or running back, which is kind of between Hill and Jefferson, and both could make a case. Hill was on pace in the first 9 games of the year. He was on pace to get over 2,000 yards. He ended up with 1,700, just over 1,700 yards. He really dropped off when Tua got hurt. Jefferson was there all year. He was the biggest contributor. He ended the year with the most receiving yards in the NFL. So I'm going to pick Jefferson too.
I think we're going to have another clean sweep here because my pick's going to be Justin Jefferson as well. I mean, when you have a quarterback that throws beach balls out like Kirk Cousins, right? And somehow Justin Jefferson manages to catch most of those. I think he really... huge impact player. He made Kirk Cousins look a lot better than he is. But yeah, hands down, he's just an amazing player to watch, and he's going to have a great future in the NFL.
And he can dance.
He dance, yeah.
For Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'm choosing Brock Purdy. He was undefeatable throughout the season except for the Eagles-Niners game because he got injured and they had Josh Johnson, and he's just a really good player. Maybe Kyle Shanahan will put him as starting QB next year, but I think he's the Offensive Rookie of the Year.
I am not picking Brock Purdy. He only played 6 games in the regular season. I don't think that's enough to qualify. Kenneth Walker did pretty good, but some games he was just non-existent in. Having 300-yard games at the end of the year would help him, but I think it goes to Garrett Wilson. He was consistent throughout the year, even with some quarterbacks that were not very accurate. He still managed to put up decent stats. I think Garrett Wilson is your Offensive Rookie of the Year.
All right, well, this will come as no surprise. Maybe, I'm a hometown boy, but I am definitely picking Brock Purdy. Going undefeated in the end of the season and continuing that streak after Garoppolo went down. I think, his story is a pretty amazing story, and we were an injury away from a Cinderella story like we have. This is a one-in-a-generation type situation. You don't see this very often. I think last time we saw this was Tom Brady when he was a rookie coming in, stepping in, leading his team to the Super Bowl. No doubt in my mind, I think it's Brock Purdy. I would agree with you about Kenneth Walker. He was very inconsistent. He struggled with injuries. But the Seahawks run game was pretty meh, I think, throughout the season.
Yeah.
They were average, right? So,
yeah.
And then Garrett Wilson... I just think, for him, it was probably the team he was part of that doesn't give him the win.
Well, I guess we're all choosing something different because I'm choosing Kenneth Walker.
Oh, wow.
Nobody thought the Seahawks were going to do good this year until they made the playoffs at a 9-8 season. Kenneth Walker's done really good. He's had big runs, big touchdowns. He helped the Seahawks make the playoffs, and I think that he might be the underdog Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Somebody is going to be right. Tyreek Woolen was impressive in his rookie year, tied the league for 6 interceptions, part of that Seahawks defense that was impressive throughout the year. Aiden Hutchinson had 3 picks and quite a few sacks. He really made an impact to the Lions defense, but the Lions defense was still the weakest in the league. I think this is a runaway. Sauce Gardner will be Defensive Rookie of the Year. He had the most passes defended, 20. He led the league in it for a rookie. That's unbelievable. And the only reason he didn't get more is people stopped throwing to him in the second half of the year. He had very few targets in the final games because they knew what kind of risk it was throwing into Sauce's way. So Sauce Gardner will take this one easily over everybody else.
All right. Well, I mean, between Sauce, Aiden, and Tyreek, it's a tough choice. I do think Aiden Hutchinson was an impact player. Knowing what the Lions were like the previous year, he did make an impact, but he didn't make enough of an impact. I think, really, from my perspective, it's Tyreek Woolen. He was a late-round pick. Nobody expected this of him. Whereas Sauce, you do expect him to play to that caliber, but for Tyreek, I think he was a surprise, and he's done a lot better than everybody expected.
I want Aiden Hutchinson to win. He's my favorite player on the Lions, probably. But it's all about the sauce. I think it's going to be Sauce Gardner. He's just done too good in his rookie season. Not many targets in the second half. Tons of passes defensed. Most in the league, like Dad said. I think it's going to be Sauce Gardner.
I'm deciding between Tariq Woolen and Aiden Hutchinson. They're both really good players. Tariq Woolen tied the league in interceptions, but I'm going with Aiden Hutchinson.
Yes!
He's a really good player on the Lions. Helps the Lions to some wins. The Lions almost made the playoffs, but that win against the Packers, and they started off 1-6, and then they had a few wins and almost made it to the playoffs. I'm choosing Aiden Hutchinson.
As much as I want to go with my heart with Christian McCaffrey because he just had a dominant season when he joined the Niners, I'm going to go with Geno Smith because I think, opposite what Aiden was saying about Kenneth Walker, I think it was really the Seahawks passing game that made them impactful. Again, he led the league in completion percentage, and, for an older guy who hasn't had a lot of playtime previously to come in and make that big of an impact for a team, no doubt.
I also want to go McCaffrey here. I'm going to cheer for McCaffrey because he did good in my fantasy team, but I think it's going to be Saquon Barkley. The Giants had done horrible in the past few years, and then Dayball came and Barkley stayed healthy, and they clicked. The Giants made the playoffs. They won a playoff game against Kirk Cousins and the Vikings, and I think that's why Barkley's going to be the comeback player of the year.
I really want to go with McCaffrey, and I'm going with him. He led the Niners to a lot of wins. I'm going with McCaffrey. Lots of touchdowns, Panthers and Niners. He's just a really good player, and he has just led the Niners to a lot of wins. Almost every win.
The way I look at it, Geno Smith, I'm not really sure what he's coming back from. Maybe sitting on the bench last year, so I'm not really sure why he's come back. McCaffrey did well, but he didn't have the stats that Saquon Barkley did. Barkley's coming back from multiple years of injuries, coming back to true form, was 4th best in yards for rushing this year, so I'm picking Barkley for comeback player of the year.
But at least one of us will get it right this time again. It's going to be between Dayball and the Giants or Peterson and the Jags. And after what Peterson did from having the number 1 overall pick to making the playoffs, I think it's going to be Doug Peterson. He's done really good. He's made Trevor Lawrence do something. His defense has shown up in some places. I think that he's going to be Coach of the Year.
I'm choosing Doug Peterson too. The Jags were the worst team in the league 2 times in a row, and I'm choosing him. He's just led the Jags to great wins against the Chargers in week, I think, 3.
Yeah.
And, yeah, he's just done really good with the Jags.
I agree. I'm with Peterson, too. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Dayball gets some votes because he's done a great job with the Giants. But I think Peterson, with one of the youngest teams in the NFL in the Jags, and taking them from a 3-win team to making the playoffs, I think Peterson will win.
As much as I want to say, Kyle Shanahan's a wizard and, he's created a tree of head coaches that have spawned out from under him, but I'm going to have to go with Peterson as well. Kyle Shanahan has a lot of great players to work with. Doug Peterson does not. To have a winning season nonetheless and make the playoffs, that's huge. That's huge.
All 4 on Doug Peterson.
The assistant coach of the year, no doubt, it's DeMeco Ryans. He's with the number 1 NFL defense in the league, first in everything, and he's just doing really good with the Niners.
I think this one is close. DeMeco Ryans for the Niners and Johnson for the Lions. I think Ryans inherited a really good defense, a well-coached defense from Robert Saleh. I think the Lions did not have the stars that the Niners defense do. And so I'm going with Johnson for the Lions. I think he took a bunch of low expectations and produced the 4th best offense in the league this year. And nobody expected that from the Lions. The only offenses better than the Lions were the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Eagles. That's the kind of company that the Lions were in for their offense. So I'm taking Johnson for the Lions.
Well, Probably no surprise here, but I am going with D'Amico Ryans. Really sad to lose him, but he was one of the most sought-after coaches for a head coaching job, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do with the Texans and hopefully change the culture there. So I do think he's a big culture impact player, and even guys like Fred Warner said they learned so much from him. All pro Fred learning from a coach is big.
I'm also going D'Amico Ryans here. I don't think it's really that close. He had like 5 second half shutouts in 5 weeks, something like that. He had a great second half with that defense, led them to the NFC Championship game, and injuries just killed them in that game. I'm also going to D'Amico Ryans. Imagine somebody that works for the Texans gets an award. Imagine that.
For moment of the year, I'm going with probably the most emotional one, Nyheim Hines and his kick return to open the game after the Bills and Damar Hamlin week that they had, where they canceled the Bengals game. They weren't sure all that week about his health status, and then the first game back, they weren't sure how they were going to react, and Hines returns it for a touchdown on the opening kickoff. So I think that was probably the biggest moment of the year.
That's a good thing to mention, the Damar situation. That's like 1 in a million chance for that to happen, and to see the league rally around him and his family was amazing. That could very easily be moment of the year, but I'm thinking purely in the aspect of football. I'm thinking either between the Vikings' massive comeback, setting the record, or J.J. Watt's retirement was pretty emotional as well. But I'm going to go with the moment of the year is the comeback. Ryan lost another big lead. Does again.
Yeah.
I'm also going with Hines' kick return touchdown. It's amazing how it was 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days since the last kick return touchdown the Bills had. They had 2 in that game. It's a fairy tale. It's storybook. It's fake. That's the moment of the year.
I'm assigned between the Vikings' incredible comeback and Justin Jefferson's amazing catch against the Bills. But I'm going with the Vikings' great comeback. It was unbelievable, the biggest comeback in NFL history. 33-0 at half, and then in the second half, the Colts only got 3 points. The Vikings just did well in that game, and I think it's the Vikings' comeback from moment of the year.
For special guest question, I will be asking Ira. Tony will be asking David. I'm going first. Ira, who is your defensive MVP and offensive MVP for the Niners?
For defensive MVP, I'm deciding between Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. It's a hard decision, but I'm choosing Nick Bosa. He's done really good this season. Fred Warner's also done really good this season, but I'm choosing Bosa. He's just done lots of sacks and lots of fumble recoveries. Yeah. For offensive MVP, I'm deciding between Debo and McCaffrey. I'm probably choosing McCaffrey. A lot of touchdowns, a lot of yards with the Niners, and I think he's the offensive MVP for the Niners.
Nice. David, for your special guest question, one of the stories of the NFL this year was the 49ers quarterback situation. From Trey Lance to Jimmy G early, then to Brock Purdy, and even in the playoffs from Josh Johnson back to Purdy. This offseason is kind of a mess. What do you think the 49ers are going to do this offseason with all of their quarterbacks?
Yeah, very unique situation from the 49ers perspective to have basically 3 quarterbacks who are capable of starting. I know that I think Shanahan had mentioned they're moving on from Garoppolo, so that makes sense. Garoppolo's aging. He's struggled with injuries. I don't think he's going to be in the mix. I know there was talk about, Tom Brady coming back, having a hometown win, but he's retired again.
Yeah. So
that likely won't happen unless he unretires again. So you never know. But between Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, I think, I would go into the season with Brock Purdy as the starter. He's a proven winner, and Trey Lance has yet to prove himself in my mind. It was unfortunate that he left early in the season with an ankle injury. You got to ride the momentum of Brock Purdy. I think he would have been undefeated had he not got injured in that first drive against the Eagles. So Brock Purdy, 1A, Trey Lance, 1B.
All right, without further ado, Let's get to one of the most popular segments of our show, Aydens' Top 5 List.
This week, we have top 5 interceptions of the regular season. Number 5, we have against the Commanders, stole it from the running back and runs it all the way back for a pick 6 to take the lead by 2 scores. Number 4, we have Quandre Diggs in Week 18. A nice pick, great hands, points the ball right at Bobby Wagner, steals it from Van Jefferson, seals the game. Now make sure you don't blink, because you won't see this interception. TJ Watt, off the line, picks it off. Number 2, right before half, we have a tip and a pick. Teamwork makes the dream work, and the Titans did that great. Number 1, in overtime, we have the walk-off pick 6 to win the game against the Cowboys. 18 tackles, 2 picks, and the walk-off touchdown for Rayshon Jenkins. That's it for this week's Top 5. Tune in next week for the final 5 of the season. For this week's last question, it's my turn. Who was the best signing/trade of last year's offseason?
I'm going to go with Hassan Reddick. I think he transformed that Eagles defense. He was a force to be reckoned with all year. Pressure on quarterback, sacks. He really changed the defensive line. So I think impact-wise, Hassan Reddick was a great acquisition for the Eagles.
And now part 2. Who was the bust signing/trade of last year?
This one is easy. Russell Wilson. He was supposed to come in and save the Broncos. They had one of the worst offenses of the league. They only had 3 wins up until the last couple games. Russell Wilson did not look like himself. The offense was anemic. It wasn't pretty. They're paying him all this money on a big contract. He needs to make more of an impact, even if he doesn't have the team around him. So Russell Wilson for sure.
You said Russell Wilson didn't look like him, but maybe he does look like him and he's just bad.
Ooh, could be.
That's it for this week's picks. Next week we have the Super Bowl.
Thank you to Ira and David Wersta for joining us this week.
We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye. Subscribe.